For nearly all of human history, the setting sun brought an absolute physical end to the world. In the void that followed, the arrival of firelight was the only thing that allowed our ancestors to reclaim a small corner of the earth. We spent hundreds of thousands of years evolving within this cycle. But today, that cycle is gone. We have to consider what happens to the human mind when we erase the shadows that defined us for so long. For thousands of generations, sunsets signaled a total transformation of reality. It was a physical wall that stopped movement, changed our biology, and forced a complete reorganization of the tribe. As the light faded, humans lost their primary survival advantage, daylight vision. Unlike the predators that hunted them, humans became physically vulnerable at twilight, unable to read the landscape or detect threats at a distance. The environment became a place of auditory signals. A snapping branch or a shift in the wind carried immediate lethal weight, turning the familiar forest into a space of constant uncertainty. To survive this vulnerability, humanity leaned into its remaining assets. Survival required the group to gather, the fire to stay lit, and the shared attention of every member to remain focused within the circle. The ancient night was a distinct habitat, an active, high-stakes environment that forced human psychology to turn inward toward the safety of the collective. The fire created a literal architecture in the dark. It established a physical boundary that separated the safety of the group from the unknown dangers of the night. This barrier filtered out the chaos of the environment. By pushing back the shadows, the firelight drew focus toward human faces and expressions, deepening the social bonds that would eventually form the basis of civilization. The practical, survival-based communication of the day, finding food, tracking animals, was no longer possible. In the stillness, the mind entered a more reflective state, shifting away from immediate tasks. In this environment, storytelling functioned as a method of symbolic knowledge storage. Before writing, narrative was the only way to ensure that critical information survived the person who discovered it. These stories were data logs for the next generation. They preserved animal behavioral patterns, mapped out long-distance migration routes, and encoded societal warnings into memorable forms that could be repeated for decades. The edge of the firelight became the crucible of our culture. It was the specific place where the hard facts of survival were transformed into the abstract meaning and shared identity of the group. Our ancestors did not view sleep as the single, private 8-hour block we expect today. Historical evidence suggests pre-industrial groups often practiced segmented sleep, waking and resting in phases throughout the night. This structure allowed the tribe to act as a shared nervous system. No individual had to remain vigilant all night, yet the group as a whole was never entirely vulnerable. This staggered rhythm provided a biological defense. As one member slept, another woke, creating a continuous chain of awareness. Because this cycle was communal, the fire was always tended. Resting was possible through social trust. Someone was always listening to the dark. Above the camp, the unpolluted sky provided a secondary system. Without artificial glare, the stars and moon served as a massive, visible calendar that marked the passage of time and the arrival of the seasons. This celestial tracking taught early humans about natural repetition and the limits of their own control. The darkness was a nightly reminder that human life was part of a much larger, predictable cycle. Communal sleep and the rhythm of the stars shaped the human brain, training us to rely on the shared vigilance of the group and the timing of the natural world. This specific filament design represents the end of the ancient rhythm. It was the mechanism that finally allowed humanity to manufacture its own day, independent of the sun or the fire. Artificial light mobilized us. We were no longer anchored to the campfire. We could now project safety forward and carry the daylight with us into the farthest reaches of the night. This mobilization scaled into a total conquest of the landscape. Permanent grids of electricity now overwrite the darkness, effectively erasing the celestial calendar that guided our ancestors for millennia. Darkness is no longer a biological barrier we must respect. We have rebranded it as an inconvenience, a space to be filled with continuous productivity, shopping, and entertainment. In defeating the night, we traded a restorative habitat for an environment of endless stimulation. We gained time, but we lost the natural boundary that once forced the mind to rest. This has created a state of artificial continuity. The biological pause that night once provided has been replaced by a world that never truly shuts down. The rhythm of the moon and the seasons has been replaced by the mechanical regulation of the clock. Our labor and our rest are now dictated by the needs of the industrial schedule. Sleep is now an individual responsibility, separated from the safety of the group and governed by a digital alarm. The shared nervous system of the tribe has devolved into a personal task we perform alone. This shift creates constant psychological friction. A brain evolved for the quiet focus of the firelight is now submerged in an environment of permanent 24-hour stimulation. We have lost the temporal space that allowed us to shift from practical labor to symbolic reflection. The work of the day simply bleeds into the night, leaving no room for the stories that once helped us make sense of the world. Instead of gathered faces and shared fire, the modern night is defined by isolation. We lie in the dark, our attention held by the cold, flickering blue light of a handheld screen. Slowing down. We survived the ancient night by deeply connecting to one another. Today, we have the light we always wanted, but we are trapped alone in a day that never truly ends.